Well, a non-executive director is normally seen as a director that, number one, doesn't work for the company, so is not an employee, but they are an officer of the company nonetheless. And number two, are usually part-time, so they're not full-time employees. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, they don't have an executive function in the organisation. However, non-executive directors come in all sorts of hues, and they do quite different things in different companies. So, for example, a non-executive director of an FT 100 listed company is likely to be very much about oversight of the executive, ensuring good governance, ensuring good internal controls, whereas perhaps an investee director of a small company who's also non-executive might very much get involved in the management of the company a lot more. The non-executive role is extremely important in business today, but if we think about a non-executive director in terms of independence, I think then it's easier to understand the importance of the role. So having an independent voice on the board is absolutely important. An FT 100 listed company, for example, is required to have half their board as independent non-executive directors, but any other company isn't required to have any sort of independence or non-exec contribution on the board. In my view, I think it's crucially important for all companies to have that sort of independent voice. Independent from its members or shareholders, independent perhaps from major stakeholders, that can just balance the view sometimes of the executive. So I see that really in 2013 and forward as being the real role that non-executives can play. Non-executive positions are really attractive actually to senior managers and executive directors. In fact, big companies have for many years encouraged their senior executives to go get a job as a non-executive on a charity board or a public sector company board, just so that they can get a different experience of how boards work in different sorts of sectors. The board that they join, of course, gain a great deal of experience and a great contribution from the executive director. He or she brings their good experience to the board. But the executive, of course, sees how governance works in different sorts of organisations. It makes a huge difference to their experience as a director. So the question we're often asked is, who can be a non-executive director and do you need any qualifications? So in the UK, as it is in most jurisdictions across the world, anyone can be a director. It's a bit like being a parent, I suppose. You don't need a qualification to be a parent, but it helps if you know what you're doing. Although you don't need a qualification, the law does fix a certain degree of competence on directors. And if you fall below that degree of competence, then you can be fixed with liability. So the law requires that a director has adequate experience and skills to serve in the particular company they're on and to bring to the board any experience they in fact say that they have. Any director, or most directors, that find themselves in difficulty, i.e. either fixed with liability or being disqualified, it's usually because they fall below that sort of competence test. So although you don't need a qualification, you really ought to be competent. In terms of improving your chances to become a non-executive director, experience, of course, always counts. So have you been on a board, either as an executive or non-executive? Our advice often is that individuals that want to build a portfolio career of non-executive positions look to find non-executive positions that they can add to their CV. So positions on housing associations, charity boards and public sector are crying out for really good directors, people with some commercial experience. On those boards, you'll really gain some good sort of governance experience that you can put on your CV. Like everything else, I think with a full CV, there's more opportunity of you securing those other sort of non-exec roles that you're looking for. So how do I prepare for an interview for a non-exec position? I suppose at the outset I ought to say that the non-executive director is the last bastion of the tap on the shoulder. So not every job that you will go for will be available via open interview. So if you're fortunate enough to secure an interview for a non-exec position, just bear in mind that perhaps the interviewer doesn't really know what a non-executive director does or what they can offer them in the organisation. So just think about your experience, what you can bring to the board, what skills that you have, and how you're just really going to make a difference on that board, and how your experience might address some of the issues that the company is facing. Secondly, if you get the opportunity, we'd always advise you go and speak to the chairman beforehand to really understand the board that you're joining, the issues that they face as a board and they face as a company, any big risk items that perhaps you should know about. And I think that will just make your interviews far more rich, and you'll be able to bring in your experience in a much more structured sort of way. I recently interviewed 4 non-executive directors for quite a large organisation. And one of the questions I asked is sort of governance. What does it mean to this particular organisation? And I have to say, of 12 non-executive directors, or aspirant non-executive directors, not many could answer the question particularly well. So bone up on that. Understand this sort of what you can bring to improve the governance or the direction of the organisation. So I think those 2 things will stand you in good stead.